Hello and welcome to another edition of Redneck Gone Green. My name is Shane Knight. I am usually the co-host of Redneck Gone Green. David Cobb, our host, is actually across on the other side of the earth right now in Athens, Greece. He's going to be back with us next week. And our guest tonight, who was supposed to be Mr. Mike Ferner, had to back out at the last minute. He was the former national director of Veterans for Peace, and it seems as if his last event, which was a hunger strike, has taken him away from being on with us tonight. So you're just going to have Shane here for a few minutes going through, well, I would say we're going to have Tracking the Crisis, but we actually don't have Tracking the Crisis this week either from Miss Mel Figueroa. She was busy, obviously, with the 4th of July holiday weekend. And speaking of which, I hope you all had a lovely 4th of July and everybody came out safe. And for those of you know people or are near or around any place in Texas where the flooding has happened, my sincere condolences for anybody who is being affected by that tragedy. It was totally preventable. It should have been prevented. And unfortunately, we're living in a society where the people that are behind the helm of this ship are really doing not only a terrible job, but they're putting us all in terrible risk. And we see the results of that playing out in Texas right now. And actually in North Carolina, where the hurricane, I believe the name of the hurricane was Chantal, made landfall and people had to evacuate their homes there too. So it's tough times. It's tough times. So if you're actually able to go out and enjoy any bit of the weekend, I'm glad. For those of you that might have been in the New York City area, I hope you got to see the fireworks show. It was a big kaboom town, but it was a hot kaboom town. This week, one of the few things I wanted to run by, just to let everybody know, of course, we all know this budget bill passed the Senate and Trump signed it into law on Friday in a big show, like he always does. Drives me up the wall, too. The way that they did the whole thing was a shenanigan, like everything else they fucking do. I found out one of the biggest blows in the bill is the over $1 trillion of cuts to Medicaid and ACA benefits, which are estimated to throw at least 17 million people off of healthcare and dramatically curtail funding for healthcare services, especially in rural areas. We even heard reports that some hospitals are talking about losing funding and are under the threat of closing. So that's an uplifting bit. This bill also cut critical SNAP benefits to millions of Americans, cutting off food assistance to up to 20% of the 42 million Americans currently dependent on the program, including 2 million children. Axios provides a map of where SNAP cuts will hit the hardest, including several red states. The New York Times gives a further detail on how the poorest quintiles of the U.S. population will suffer declines in the quality of life under the bill, despite small tax breaks for tips and increases in the child tax credit, which is going to be difficult for you to qualify for. Deferred benefit cuts take effect over time. Let's see, what else do they say in the Tracking the Crisis? And for those of you who need the link or may want it, oh, looks like we're going to be joined after all by Mr. Mike Ferner. Okay, yay. We're going to change plan here. Let's see. Yay. Mr. Mike Ferner, like I said before, the former National Director of Veterans for Peace, has actually just joined us. So I'm going to welcome Mr. Mike Ferner to Redneck Gone Green. Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine. Sorry for being late.
That's okay, man. Shit happens and the world's upside down.
Well, that's true on both counts.
That is very true. So you and I don't know each other. I know you and David are friends, so this is our first meeting. But I had a chance to look at the things that you sent over, especially the video that you sent over. I loved it. What's the title?
Madmen Arsonists.
Yeah, it's a great phrase, and you did a very good job of down to a succinct concept. And the concept that I really want, I guess, if you want, we could jump right into going through all of it because I got really excited when I watched it. Unfortunately, we don't really have the ability to play that now. I think Google Chrome changed something, and StreamYard is having an issue with a couple of features that they've. So I was notified we don't have video replaying capability at the moment. So
okay. Well, even
hopefully
though
they get that fixed.
if you felt like just even doing the audio, that's fine too. Whatever, I don't care.
Well, I can't really. Yeah, I don't think I can do the audio, but I
Okay.
can. Do you if you have a link to it somewhere? If you could email that to Chris,
Okay.
and she can get that on there. I love this. No crowns. Yes. Welcome everybody to Redneck Gone Green. Thank you for joining us again. Mr. Mike Ferner is here. He's the former National Director of Veterans for Peace, and has been. Well, you've done a lot. It seems. City Council. You were in Vietnam.
No, I wasn't in Vietnam. I was in the Navy during that period, and I worked at a Navy hospital in Illinois and took care of guys that came back.
Ah, okay. All right. So you got to see firsthand really what happens to people when they come back from the horrors of war.
Yep. And
well, I don't know if David told you or not, but I myself have been. Yeah, I served in the Special Forces of the Marine Corps for 4 years, right before 9/11.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you know,
I just the guy I just met in Toledo a couple of months ago was in the Marines from '98 to 2002, and he is the fellow that came up with the idea of doing this fast that we just concluded, and he said, "Well, why don't we try doing that?" And I said, "Well, give it a try, but I don't know how far it's going to go. But as it turns out, it went pretty far."
Well, let's get into it then, Mike. Why don't you give everybody an introduction to yourself, a little bit about your personal story, where you grew up, kind of where you're from, all that introduction stuff.
Okay. Well, I grew up in rural Ohio, worked on farms when I was a kid, and had the cultural shorthand for people that are old enough to recognize it is I had a head full of John Wayne movies when I was in high school. And I graduated in '69. So in those days, and I didn't want to go to college. So, pretty much sure of getting drafted. So anyway, I enlisted as a hospital corpsman, thinking that would be a good alternative. And the first day of school for Navy Hospital Corps, opened a book and it said, "The purpose of the Naval Hospital Corps is to keep as many men at as many guns as many days as possible." And right there, I thought, boy, this ain't quite what I was thinking. And so I got to work at that hospital and took care of guys that came back in pieces, and was fortunate to have some good friends as fellow corpsmen who had been through college. They had used their college deferments before they enlisted, and so they were 4 years older and a lot smarter about the ways of the world, and introduced me to all sorts of things I never would have. Well, it would have taken me quite a while to pick up in farm country in Ohio. So anyway, then it really opened my eyes. And after a couple of years of doing that, I realized, I'm just part of the machine. So I just can't keep doing this. So I applied for and eventually got a discharge as a conscientious objector. That's been, and it's been pretty much all systems go ever since then. So I did a stint as a union organizer for AFSCME, the Public Employees Union. I was on city council for a few years.
Where was that?
Toledo City Council from '89 to '93, and got some interesting things done, that you can do in local government. So it was a lot of work, but it was rewarding. And then I did communications for the Farm Labor Organizing Committee for a few years out of Toledo. And then also the group that David Cobb and I were in, the Program on Corporations, Law, and Democracy. I did some fundraising and communications for them for 2 or 3 years.
So what is that? That's POCLAD?
Yeah. As Molly Ivins said, it leaves them with the unattractive acronym of POCLAD.
Well, it took me a minute to figure it out. Tell us a little bit about what POCLAD actually is. As I understand, you said the Program on Corporations, Law, and Democracy. Is that right?
You got it, man. You got it. We will send you your two-way risk radio. You're in. Yeah, that's what it is. Richard Grossman, probably the smartest organizer I ever met in my life, got that started. And he had already started analyzing why, in the environmental movement, but other movements as well, why we kept working so hard and weren't really getting anywhere. And so he went back to the beginnings of corporate power and started researching, how they got started, at least particularly the British ones, and what that meant here in the colonies when the Virginia Company had the Virginia Colony and the Massachusetts Bay Company had Massachusetts, and how the royally chartered companies, stockholders, mostly the privileged, of course, and the aristocracy, how they were given the power by their royal charters to rule, to raise an army, to collect taxes, to do everything a government does. And of course, they, as in any situation with that kind of power, they were known to abuse it. And after the American Revolution, one of the things they wanted to do was figure out how to deal with these corporations so they wouldn't be so abusive. And there was no more king to charter them, so they were chartered by the states. And they weren't just given this open-ended, free charter to, go wild. They were given a charter of very limited capitalization, enough they could raise enough money to do whatever was in their charter to do, like build a railroad, a canal, a textile mill, whatever. They couldn't invest in anything else. They couldn't own another corporation. They had to get their corporate charter renewed every so many years. So they were on a very short leash, as we used to say in POCLAD. And of course, people that were running the corporations didn't like that, and they wanted to have as much money and control as they could. So over the years, they kept banging away at these restrictions that the states had placed in their charters. And for our purposes, it's enough to refer to the railroad corporations that finally in 1886 were able to convince the Supreme Court that they should get the same rights as persons for the 14th Amendment. For purposes of the 14th Amendment, there was a tax case in Santa Clara County, California, and the county was assessing the railroad in such a way they felt was unfair and not like everybody else. And so they took it through the courts. Interestingly, a guy from my town here of Toledo was a chief justice at the time. Lincoln appointed him chief justice. And in 1886, he was still in that position. And he was an attorney for a railroad. And a majority of the Supreme Court was either attorneys or on the boards of railroads. So, that bullshit about them being, not influenced by politics and just going according to the law is ridiculous. It never was like that. These were people who had class interests, and they made sure their class interests were upheld. And the big way they did that in 1886 was to open the door for corporations to have the same rights as human beings, which were not meant, corporations were not meant to have those in the Constitution, but the Supreme Court decisions shoehorned them in. And so it was started with the 14th Amendment, equal protection and due process. And then it was Fourth Amendment, protection from search and seizure. So corporations, the modern example is OSHA can't do a surprise inspection at a workplace because corporations are protected, just like the cops have to have a warrant to search your home. Yeah. Same thing. So on and on and on for just about every one of the Bill of Rights that were meant to protect human beings from the overreach of government, First Amendment, and so forth. And then, of course, in the late 60s and 70s, the Supreme Court decisions opened up by using the First Amendment and applying it to corporations. We're able to say, well, you can start spending money because money is the same thing as speech. And if you have more money than somebody else, that's okay. It's still speech, and you can spend as much as you want. And we know where that ended up. So that's the kind of a nickel tour of that one. And I've been interested in getting Veterans for Peace to pick up on this analysis because and that's what the Madmen Arsonists 2.5 minutes is about. The fact that the people who are running this country are really not the politicians. I mean, they have a role, but the people who are determining what happens and what the policies are. I call them madmen arsonists because they go.
Yeah, I love that phrase.
Yeah, they go around the world setting fires all over the place and making big money on that, both by burning things down and blowing them up and by rebuilding them afterwards. And the movement folks, we bust our ass running around with little bucket brigades trying to put them out. And it's crazy. We're never going to be able to get anywhere unless we figure out how to take away, in a simple analogy, take the matches away from the madmen arsonists, which in this case means taking the power to govern away from them so that they don't have the ability to lobby. They can't even advertise without getting legislative permission. They have no rights. They have privileges that are granted by legislatures, but that's it. They can't come into court and say, well, hey, we got to be able to run this commercial because we got First Amendment rights. Well, no, you don't anymore. So that's what I'm hoping to get Veterans for Peace interested in so we can try turning the corner and get ahead of the curve a little bit.
Well, I always go back to I'm surprised I didn't hear you say the phrase Citizens United. Yeah. Because in my head, and I think a lot of our viewers and listeners would also, that's like the first thing in their mind when they think of corporations as having too much power. I love oligarchs are now technocrats. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you for joining us and thank you for commenting too.
Well, Citizens United, it is important, but you have to keep in mind that was the third of a series of Supreme Court decisions that started in 1967 that opened up the floodgates of money for political contributions. Mm-hmm. I mean, Citizens United was the reason it got so much attention was because groups like POCLAD and the other groups in the left movements had for a few years before that been raising holy hell about corporations having the rights of people and money equals speech and all that sort of thing. So in 2010, when the Supreme Court came out with that, there was a hell of an uproar, but it was only the third of 3 Supreme Court decisions that were right along the same lines. There was one in 67 and one, I think, in 76. And then the 2010 was Citizens United.
Well, somebody commented about it a moment ago saying, I forget who said it, something about, let's see if I can find it. Yeah. It was always an oligarchy.
Yeah.
Or plutocracy. Yeah. Either one. Because to hear you say that going all the way back to the Virginia, I forget the name of the company. The
Virginia company, the Massachusetts Bay Company, and they were given charters to form these colonies and run them like a government.
Yeah. Okay.
And then
when
the Constitution,
I wasn't paying attention in school that day, I guess.
Well, yeah, right. Like you really were explained to that. I never entered in it.
Exactly.
But then when the Constitution came in, it was written by.
Right. Yeah, they wrote it to put it in place to allow this to sort of fester, I guess is a good word.
Yeah, well, we the people consisted of what, 10, 15% of the population. You had to be white, you had to be male, you had to own enough property, or you weren't even considered covered by the Constitution. Of course, slaves were property, women were nothing, blah, blah, blah. So, the elites had the upper hand from the very beginning. And the rest of us had to fight like crazy to get included in any of those protections. So particularly people who were not white males had to fight like crazy to get included. And then all at the same time, the corporations are banging away at the legal system and going back over and over and over again until they finally are able to come up with enough of a cockamamie idea that they get the constitutional protections of people, which is a huge, huge benefit.
Yeah, especially in best government money can. That's what we got.
Yeah.
So you mentioned trying to get Veterans for Peace to sort of work alongside to help the efforts of undoing the legal structure that the corporations have basically built for themselves. How does that work?
Well, there's a group that actually grew out of the work of the Program on Corporations, Law, and Democracy called Move to Amend. And it's a very healthy national group with a good number of active affiliates around the country. And their whole thing is to get enough congressional members to support an amendment it's called We the People Amendment, which basically says corporations are not people and money is not speech. Very simple. And in the last session of Congress, I know they had 90 some members of the House supported this. Now, one of the things the founders did was make it damn hard to change the Constitution. So you need 2/3 of Congress to vote in favor of an amendment and then send it out to the states. And it's, 2/3 or 3/4 of the states have to okay it. So it's incredibly hard. And some people in Veterans for Peace have told me, well, what's the point of doing this? It's never going to happen. And my response is, how long did it take women to get the right to vote? Elizabeth Cady Stanton and her fellow radicals say, oh, well, yeah, we'd like to get the right to vote, but it ain't ever going to happen. So let's just to hell with it. You got to have a vision of what the country could be like if people actually could govern it without corporations doing it for us and to us. And that vision is, in my opinion, it's not going to be realized until you get them out of the Constitution and take those constitutional protections away from them, so they have no constitutional right to lobby or insist on warrants for any of that stuff. So
I have a hard time envisioning trying to educate a politician about this enough to where they get on that side of it, because they're taking money from corporations all over the left and right, and it's so difficult for people to actually run for office without doing that.
Yeah.
It just seems, I love the idea, but to be fair, we just had here in New York City, Zoran got, he won the Democratic nomination for the mayoral race coming up this November, and didn't do it with any corporate money.
Yeah.
And is speaking up about doing some reining in of the corporate power in this city, which is why they're all in freak out mode.
Yeah, right. I was in New York when that primary election happened. We were doing the fast then, and that was, that really got a lot of people excited and happy when he won the Democratic primary. But he's going to run into the same problems on a bigger scale that I ran into as part of the Toledo city government. There's all these ways that the Supreme Court decisions have vested these rights in corporations to do all sorts of things that they were never intended to have. And that really hamstrings local government. For example, if you don't want to have any Walmarts in your town, tough. This Supreme Court decision, I'd have to take a look and see what the citation is, but it said you can't you can't just say you don't want these kind of stores. They're legal, as long as they're legal. The only thing a local community can do is if the commercial or industrial operation that you don't want needs a zoning change, and you have politicians with enough backbone to say we're not changing that zoning. You can keep them out that way, but that's got nothing to do with what the values of that community are.
That's right. So you were here in New York City participating in a hunger strike, right?
Yeah, well, we call it a fast. I'm not sure how much difference there is, but I think a hunger strike to a lot of people means something that's open-ended, and we purposely did not make it open-ended.
Okay.
We said it's going to be for 40 days, and it's going to be 250 calories a day because some months ago we saw that was reported to be the amount of calories the average person in Gaza was getting, which, Lord knows what they're getting now. But, we were always quick to point out that, we had all the good water we wanted to drink. Our water wasn't killing us. We had a safe place to go home and sleep at night, without worrying about getting bombed, and on and on and on. So what we were doing was a big inconvenience in a way, but had, only a symbolic comparison to what was going on in Gaza. So, but, it was something that over 800 people around the country and in a handful of, in 5 other countries, a handful of people in each of those countries heard about it. And people were very glad to be able to have a vehicle that would allow them to do something more than just write a letter to the editor or stand on a corner with a sign.
Right.
Because people were just
How many people do you think participated overall?
Well, 800 people registered. And I know there was probably at least twice that many that participated because, for example, there were 40 people in Maine that participated, and they kept in touch with each other, and a bunch of them came down for the last day of the fast. They came down to New York. But it's very possible that 2 or 3 of those people even registered. And the same thing, there'd be a group of people in whatever commute town, and who knows how many of those people actually got around to registering. So I'm sure there was significantly more than 800. And there were people in South Africa, Ireland, France, Italy, Germany, and
France,
and Australia that were participating in it. Not large numbers, but people who participated.
Oh, that's good. I say France because I'm a man who loves French cooking and French culture, and the idea of not really being able to partake in that for a period of 40 days.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I could stomach that. How do you measure, how would you measure, I guess, define whether or not it was successful, the effort to what was the outcome desired? Did you reach it?
Well, we stated in the purpose of the thing when we kicked it off. We had a couple of planning meetings and threw it together pretty quickly, and we said 2 things was what we were fasting for. One was to have unlimited. What I'm trying to think of the term, adequate humanitarian aid delivered by the UN, not this cockamamie group of thugs that Israel and the United States put together, but UN authorized and overseen aid, and no more weapons, no more U.S. weapons to Israel, so that we could stop the genocide. Well, you know where both of those things are at now, and who knows how long it's going to take before the misery and the killing and the starvation ends. But that's what we thought. We have to do something. And what's the most dramatic or the most extensive thing that we can do? And other than doing what Aaron Bushnell did, which not many people have enough courage to do that, which he self-immolated a couple of years ago. So, short of that, what can someone do that's nonviolent? And that's why we came up with the idea of the fast.
Yeah, okay, I'm behind that. That makes total sense. Was there any like substantial media coverage for it?
No, not in. Well,
Yeah.
put it this way: not in the U.S. mainstream corporate press, whatever you want to call it.
Right, of course
And
not. They're going to avoid
we
that.
tried, we tried and tried and tried, and we had people who had some connections with the Times and the Post and the so forth. Try. You got absolutely nothing. So we got coverage from Democracy Now, from Al Jazeera, from Ralph Nader's columns. He mentioned it a number of times. From the Turkish equivalent of the Associated Press, it's called Anadolu, and they did a great job of covering us. And we did interviews with lots of podcasts and radio shows around the country. And in some places, like for example, in Toledo, the Toledo newspaper did a story because I was there, and some of the hometown TV stations or newspapers would run a story because, a local person went to New York to participate in this. But, as far as being picked up by Reuters or anybody, forget it. And we went to their places and called and wrote and on and on and on.
Well, the situation that you guys you were standing up for, in solidarity with, and trying to make a statement to help bring more attention to this, because it is, this country's a pretty big place, and it's in a scary moment, and there's so many things really that I would say too many things for people to really focus their energy and time on. But this is a big one, and a lot of the young people are really involved, and outside of that demographic of people, it barely seems to resonate as a real issue. And
we had the chance to talk to a lot of, this is not a scientific survey, but we were on First Avenue, right across the street from the UN headquarters, planted in front of the U.S. mission to the UN for 40 days. And we got to talk to a lot of people and see a lot of cabs and cars and trucks go by, and saw the reaction from people. And we got around to a number of places in New York, and every place that we went, people were just glad to see what we were doing. There were, sure, if we'd have run into some Zionists, they wouldn't have been too happy. But in general, people, even though they might not be activists, they would just immediately say, "Oh, what's going on there is just so terrible, and I'm glad that you're doing something, et cetera, et cetera."
Yeah.
So,
well, it's great. I mean, New York is a place for that, where you're going to get a lot of support for it. Which that's why one of the reasons I really, really love living here. And actually, the UN isn't very far from where I live. It's like a 20-minute walk north of where I'm at. But I want to shift gears for a minute and go back to the work that Veterans for Peace does, specifically. Like, so can you give me a little more on what they actually do?
Yeah. Well, one thing, we have a convention coming up starting on the 26th of July for 3 days. And it's going to be in, of all places, Las Vegas at the end of July. But if people are interested in going, or even just seeing what the program looks like, they can go to our website, which is veteransforpeace.org. And one of the first things they'll see on the website is the information about the convention. And this is the first in-person one we've had for 5 years, because we started doing virtual ones when COVID came in, and we've not gotten back to in-person ones. So a lot of people are looking forward to that. And we'll have speakers there. This is this year's 80th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 50th anniversary of the end of the American War in Vietnam, and the 40th anniversary of Veterans for Peace. So we're kind of tying that in, and have speakers that address those various things, plus the issues of the day. And our organization has got, we've had a number of projects that our members are engaged in, an awful lot. Everything from trying to get justice for the people in Vietnam and U.S. Service people and their families from Agent Orange effects to, had a tribunal to hold the weapons makers somewhat accountable, or at least have a well-documented case against them, and just a lot of different things that our members are interested in. We've got a historic boat called the Golden Rule that was involved in the protesting the atmospheric nuclear testing in the Pacific in the 60s. And some members out in California found it and reconditioned it. And now we use that to go around to lots of cities and do educational things. And we're always involved in, picket lines and getting arrested and that sort of activism too.
Yeah. Well, as a veteran, I haven't really taken the plunge yet to join in a lot of the activities, but I mean, I'm doing what I do here at Democracy at Work and trying to give people, bring this to our audience and let them know about what they're doing. And
well, sign up, man.
I will do that. But one of the things I think I hear people ask a lot because of the current status of the geopolitical environment we are all suffering under these days. One of the things I get the most from people are, what is the military going to do, if anything? What are the veterans going to do, if anything? Because people want to know how close we actually are to legitimate fascism.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say that we've been here before, but we've been close before. And in Trump's last term, it was the military that sort of said, no, we're not going to be that crazy. And, where do you see us going? How close do you feel like we are to fascism?
Well, I think we're in it. We're in it. There's varying degrees of it, and we're not marching people to the ovens yet, but we are helping Israelis do the same thing to the Palestinians that the Germans did to the Jews. The Germans showed the Jews how to get to the showers, as they were called, the ovens. And the Zionists are showing the Palestinians how to get to the aid stations where they're killed. So, and we're bankrolling that whole damn thing. So, by extension, we're already there, and we're seeing it in this country to an alarming degree. The way people are getting, I mean, my God, the budget for ICE just got jumped up by 10 times. It's the largest component of the discretionary spending, I think, in the budget for the next few years. They're building these prisons all over the place, or taking people off the street. I mean, the ICE agents come in with masks and no identification. I mean, that's fascism. That is fascism.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, $170 billion in increased funding for ICE.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're just supercharging the mass deportations that they're doing. It's what you just said, building prisons. And the idea that Trump floated the other day of having detainees work. Here we are back to the corporations, to work for the corporations. That's fucking slavery.
Yeah.
And that's what they want. And who's going to stop them?
Well, nobody but us, because we ain't going to get it. We're not going to get the leadership from the politicians on this. As usual, they'll jump out in the front of a parade that is already created. Veterans for Peace is doing our best, and we're not a huge organization, but we're doing our best to communicate with active duty military personnel to keep their humanity and don't obey unlawful orders. And there is a pleasantly increasing number of GIs that are calling places like the GI Rights Hotline and finding out what their rights are to avoid having to carry out illegal orders. It's probably not a majority of them by any means, but there's quite a ferment among the active duty personnel, and we've seen that. This last year, I helped 3 young Air Force people get out of the Air Force as conscientious objectors. So we know that that's a dynamic that's building in the active duty people.
Well, I hope it continues to do so. I know I've spoken with a lot of active duty Marines and veterans too about this very topic, and we all kind of feel that when push comes to shove, there will be a dynamic split in the military. It's going to be big. Who's going to follow who?
Yeah,
I think the veteran community will probably be the same way. Some for, some against, but less for all this crap than those against it. But nobody wants to see this horse shit in the street.
Well, going back to I've talked with Veterans for Peace members who were there in Washington and saw this happen, where I think it was for May Day in '71. One of the I can't remember if it's the 82nd Airborne or the 100 whatever Airborne, but there was a large detachment of airborne troops that were stationed in DC and kind of hidden away. And these friends of mine that were participating in the demonstrations said they were walking by and they got, hey, come on over here. And they said, we want you to know that we are not going to shoot at anybody. We don't care what the orders are. And we want you to tell people that. And so, there's been that consciousness all along. And, we just hope that there's enough of it these days.
Yeah, I do too. I'm really worried about the whole ice building up a bit, but I don't know. What advice do you have for our audience members that are looking to get involved or stay more informed as this becomes a growing issue and an evolving one too?
Well, probably most of your audience is already tuned in to places where they can get good information. I would guess that. But, help your friends and family and neighbors find out, send them some links to some of the sources that you use so they can start hearing what the hell's going on. Al Jazeera and any number of places. And personally, just take an assessment of what you have done individually during this time. And whatever it is, figure out how to do something more.
Yeah.
And if you're holding a sign on the side of the street, God bless you, that's great. But get together with people and sit down in the goddamn street. That's the sort of thing that we need to have a lot more of. Is just, throwing a wrench in the works and sand in the gears, however you want to put it, so that this damn machine can't just keep rolling on and destroying people the way it is.
I agree. All right, we're getting close to time. I want to give you room to, if you have any final thoughts, anything else you want to share with everybody, go for it.
Well, I'd like to reflect just for a minute on this fast that we just completed. It took off beyond our wildest expectations, and not only in numbers, but the feelings, the spiritual, if you want to, or political, or however you want to describe it, transformative nature of that fast for the people who were fasting and the people who were involved, and maybe not fasting themselves, but closely involved in supporting it in some way. And we developed this amazing community both in New York with the Veterans for Peace members who were fasting there, but around the country and around the world, of people who saw this as something that they could do to more adequately express their concern and their outrage at what's going on. And, people through the ages have experienced this. I mean, it's nothing new, but it was a real eye opener and a heart opener for me to be involved with people who cared that much and were ready to, without making too big of a point of it, I mean, I almost died. I had some underlying health conditions, and I lasted 21 out of the 40 days, and my electrolytes tanked, and it doesn't really give you a whole lot of symptoms. And I just happened to check into the VA in Manhattan and get checked out, and they admitted me to the hospital for 6 days. And there was another person, Kathy Kelly, who a lot of your listeners may know is a venerable peace activist. She weighs 94 pounds. She got down to 86, and she got checked out, and the doctor said, "Ma'am, the next step is organ failure." And so, this is not, and this is, 250 calories a day is a starvation diet, and a lot of people were able to get through it okay. But the point is, if you've got some underlying health problems, or you're drinking bad water or whatever, and that's the amount of food that you got, you're going to die. Period. I mean, there's no two ways about it. So it was a transformative experience.
Well, it sounds like it. I don't know. I think the longest I've done was for like 17 days, and that wasn't really intentional or for a grand purpose. It just happened to be where I was and was doing.
Yeah. Well, it helps if it's for a grand purpose and you're doing it with other people. That it makes a big difference.
It certainly does. It certainly does. And thank you all for doing that. And thank you for bringing it to our attention, bringing it here, and for helping spread the word about these types of actions people can actually get involved with. Because it's like you said, it's really, really important to take it up and actually put your body out there and do something.
Well, and thank you. Thank Redneck Turned Green for the chance to talk about this with you.
Oh, yeah. And it was a pleasure to meet you, Mike.
Same here.
All right. Take care, man.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So thank you, folks. I hope you enjoyed that discussion with Mr. Mike Ferner. Sorry, I didn't want to get his name wrong. Mike Ferner. It was a fascinating conversation there. I wanted to give you a heads up about our guest next week is going to be, let's see if I can find her name. I should have left this up here. Yes, Miss Jody Banks of Code Pink will be joining David and I live next Monday night at 6 p.m. I want to thank everybody for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe, sign up, share all this stuff with everybody that you know. Because the goal here is to educate people, to let them know about the issues that are going to affect their lives one way or another, and to get everybody involved as best they can and as often as they can. And if you haven't, go check out the Redneck Gone Green podcast. Let's see. I had the link here. Yeah, redneckgonegreen.substack.com. You can go there and get a read up on what the show is going to be about next week. A lot of other good stuff there. And also, don't forget to check out and sign up for the Democracy at Work Substack. That's democracyatwork.substack.com. You can find it on our website too, or here on the YouTube channel as well. I hope y'all take care. Take care of one another, and we'll see y'all on down the line, okay?